Welcome back to the channel, everybody. This is the Battle Don, and I'm here to continue in the counter-revolutionary worldview warfighting series. Today, we're going to look at the identify aspect of the times. Okay, remember, train, identify, arm, engage, assess. This is all about solutions, things that you can do right now. And so part of that is preparing yourself, gaining information that will help you to understand some of the changes that are coming about and you will face within the next few months and few years. We're going to look at some intelligence. All right. Intelligence is all about information gathering. We're going to take a look at how people interact, people groups internally, and how they interact with others. There's a couple of things that I want you to keep in mind throughout this discussion. This is going to be somewhat of a very sobering report, but I want you to keep in mind that there is hope. Hope in the youth that are coming up in this system and are seeing these changes and are going to be the drivers of innovation and also just keeping things together for places that are going to be facing some deep austerity. Another thing is we're going to see where decisions that nations make in the past come back to affect them. So this is going to all center on the prophecy from Daniel that I discussed in a previous discussion, but we're going to go into a lot more detail here. Recall that the Daniel prophecy dealt with the march of empires from the time of the Babylonians to the time of the final empire. So we went from the Babylonians down through the Medes and Persians, the Greeks, the Romans. So this prophecy was given at the time of the Babylonians. So we see the progression of empires followed that exactly with the splitting of the Roman Empire to east and west. You see the legs, and now we're getting to what I believe is the 10 kingdoms. The emergence of the 10 kingdoms is happening right now before our eyes. So what I'm going to do is lay out what these 10 kingdoms could possibly shape up into. And we have a lot of very strong indications right now. And I'm going to also speculate as well. But what I want to drive home is that this is real. This is happening right now. It's unfolding at an accelerated pace. One of the major events, I guess you could say the catalyst for this acceleration that we're seeing, the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine has helped to really draw a line in the sand in which we see 5 kingdoms on one side, 5 kingdoms on the other. This prophecy deals with the human body. It's human anatomy, the head, the chest, the stomach area, down to the groin area, the legs, down to the feet. So to help me think about this, I said, all right, what about human anatomy that's special about the feet? And so the thing that's interesting about feet is that feet and hands, most of the bones in the body are there. So looking at the toes, 2 bones in the big toe and 3 bones in the other toes. That's how I'm going to structure this discussion of the 10 kingdoms. Again, iron mixed with miry clay, strong mixed with weak. So what you're going to see is on each foot, they're going to be strong and weak as head relative to one another. And then within the toe, within each kingdom, there's going to be one power center that is the most dominant. Then there will be others that will make some sort of confederation together to comprise a single force. So that's how I'm going to organize this discussion. So dealing with the eastern foot, Russia. I think Russia is going to form an alliance with the Arab Islamic world. Russia has one of the largest Islamic populations of any European country. They have interactions with the Islamic world going back to the 700s, if I'm not mistaken. Nations, the stands, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, on one side of the Caspian, then the Black Sea area, you've got nations like Georgia, for example, Islamic influence there. Then lower part of Western Asia, you've got the Middle East, the home of Islam. Then going across the north of Africa, those are Arab Islamic nations: Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Morocco, Mauritania. Recent statements by the president of Tunisia, to me, exposed where the Arab-dominated parts of Africa are not going to have a strong alliance with sub-Saharan Africa. That's why I say that they're going to go more with Russia than with the rest of Africa. Now, next, China. The president of China just left from Russia. They had a big meeting. A lot of very important developments are still unfolding from that as I record this at the beginning of spring 2023. So China is definitely going to be the head of one of these kingdoms. Now, I believe that because of the event that just took place in Russia, that the security alliance was formed between Russia and China. So Russia has China's back. And thinking about this geographically, China then can focus more on the direction from which the enemy lies. And so that's going to be off of its eastern coast. I believe that China is going to form a very close alliance with the Pacific Islands, the Micronesian people, the Polynesian people, and the Melanesian people. These islands would comprise regions that face China's main threat from the West, as well as isolate Japan. I don't think Korea is going to go with the West. I believe that Korea will go with the East. There's implications for some reunification between North and South. China being able to facilitate something like that would be enormous. And I think that more than likely, that's the way it's going to happen, because China is just too strong and the Western influence is not the same as it was. China being able to secure the Philippines and that region, that will provide them with secure trade routes going back towards the rest of the world. So China must secure these routes. That's why having the Philippines on their side is going to be very important. So moving to the next, we have India. What I think is going to happen or shape up in this part of the world is it's going to be a revival of sorts of Greater India. We got to keep in mind that India is the home of Hinduism and Buddhism. The influence culturally through religion and philosophy and art of ancient India has been enormous throughout the region. Indonesia, Malaysia, power centers there. Of course, there are things that need to take place inside of India domestically. And also, there needs to be a peace with Pakistan. Once peace with Pakistan and India is achieved, it will be much easier to have a sense of a greater India. At that point, a greater India will become much more clear to the people there in that region. Hindu peoples are numerous in Indonesia, Malaysia, that area, as well as the Buddhist people, but they all coexisted at one point to a much greater degree that they have in recent history. And I think there's going to be a revival of that. But there's a lot of work that needs to take place. Next, we go to Brazil. We already see Brazil as the dominant force in Latin America. I think next we will have Mexico as a power center. Mexico is not going to go with the West. I think Mexico is going to go with the East. 10th most populous nation on the planet, if I'm not mistaken. If you've seen recently, we've had statements made by AMLO, and he has spoken in a way that's very defiant to the United States. Also, a lot of bad blood between Mexico and the United States because of the racialization of politics. All of these things culminated to this point. Then you have a third power center, some sort of confederation between Cuba and Haiti. The significance of that, the symbolism of that throughout the Caribbean, I believe that a lot of people could get behind something like that. Just 5 years ago, something like that is be laughable. But the young people in Haiti, they will be open to something like this. Much more will have to develop along these lines. But Cuba and Haiti, the people there have been waiting a long time for some change, and they will seize on the opportunity as soon as it presents itself. Next, we come to Africa. Of course, we got South Africa as dominant amongst the African Union. Another power center is going to be Ethiopia. This is important because Ethiopia sits at that Red Sea channel, ancient trade route that accounts for a large amount of the whole world's trade. So having that power center right there, and plus the significance of Ethiopia within Africa is the only nation that was not colonized, just adds to the symbolic effect of this. Then recently there was a peace deal signed, so those internal conflicts are being resolved. And so this is what's going to allow Ethiopia to become that power center, the Horn of Africa. So going over to the other side of Africa, we have Nigeria. Recent elections in Nigeria, millions of young people there that want to see a change, open to doing things differently than had been done for so long. And once internal strife is resolved in Nigeria, Nigeria can take its place as the dominant power center in that part of Africa. With that, we have the eastern foot of this 10 kingdoms. So there's 5 in the east, there's 5 in the west. Now, in the west, the western foot, I think that the developments in Ukraine have been critical to this. So let's start with the big toe. I think we all know the United States is there at the head of that big toe. It's going to be the United States and Canada. I think so much of this is going to boil down to geography. It'll just make sense geographically speaking. The US and Canada, the key power center for the western foot. Next, I think that the EU is going to dissolve with the Ukraine war, especially the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline. I totally believe that the European Union is not going to survive. With that being said, I think that there's going to be 2 kingdoms that arise in Europe. One, the head is going to be Norway. With the energy resources that Norway has, they're going to gain more and more dominance within Europe. There's going to be a power center in the UK and a power center in France. So Norway, UK, and France. Then I think that there's going to be another kingdom with Poland, that region, as a head, taking all that animosity from the Ukraine conflict and parlaying that into geopolitical leverage. I think Poland is going to become a power center. Then with it, you have a weakened Germany, as well as you'll have Italy. Again, Poland, Germany, Italy. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, but the power that Europe once had is not the same anymore. So then in the Pacific, we're going to have Australia, New Zealand, Japan, isolated geographically from the greater West. They'll work with each other to maintain peace. I think Japan, with the demographic situation, as well as the bad blood between itself and other Asian nations, I think that they'll remain to go with the West, but not in an aggressive sense. Then you have Israel. It's a special case because in Western Asia, completely isolated. Again, with Arab Islamic unity solidifying, when you see peace between Iraq and Iran, the possibility for pan-Arabic action will be much more feasible, isolating Israel more and more. So who's going to be with Israel? The Jewish diaspora. So you have Israel, then you have the greater Jewish diaspora in other parts of the world that will support Israel and try their best to, wherever they are, engage those nations for the benefit of Israel. That only makes sense. So what we see is a Western foot dominated by the United States and the greater European centers, as well as Japan and Israel. Another thing about Israel is it's not as if Israel has all friends in the West, but they have less friends, it would appear, in the East. So their situation is particularly fragile. 3 years ago, when I published the book, I couldn't see it. But now when I hear about the WEF and the Great Reset, I think more that really this is about the changes that are going to come to Europe, to a lesser extent to the United States, Canada. Austerity, the economic austerity and the political upheaval that the WEF foresees and talks about taking advantage of, that's going to be in Europe as well as in the United States. So we already see what's happening in France. We see what's happening in Germany with the protests throughout Europe. This is just going to continue. The banks in America is happening as well. I think that internal pressure is going to force the empire to retract, force the rulers of the United States to look internally. The domestic pressure is building, and I think that this summer is going to be a very critical time. So this is my speculation about the 10 kingdoms. I think I'm convinced that the 10 kingdoms are taking shape right now. Things are happening every day. This is what's shaping up to be the last hurrah for the world system. So that should give you hope. And what it should also do is help you to understand some of the things that are taking place. What is this world system? This world system is the system of social and spiritual authority that has dominated human history. As long as we can go back and record, the world system is characterized by theft, death, and destruction. If you live in the West, you need to try to follow news from the East, see what they're talking about, because you want to make sure that you're basing your decisions on the best information. So if when you look at your local media and they talk about everybody in the world is suffering, you need to double check to make sure that no, actually it might just be your part of the world that's suffering, and people in other parts that are under other systems of governance are actually having an increase in their standard of living. Take this and as food for thought and make more educated decisions. So thank you again for joining me. I'm going to come out with some more information. Again, solutions, things that you can do right now to help you not only survive, but have victory in this world system.